All right, this is totally impromptu. Normally, I give some heads up about going live, but I don't know. I just had the opportunity, and something came up that look, I it's something that's already been on my mind. It's not supposed to be just something that's like made to be just topical or anything else like that. But I had just read somewhere on the internet, amongst everything else that's going on, that so Steve-O, who is almost 16 years sober, which is awesome and insane to think that he still did some of the Jackass movies sober. Bill Maher, who I kind of think is a huge dork. He has a podcast where he does video podcast too, right? Where he smokes weed a lot. I don't know. He's doing this like cool Hugh Hefner stoner thing going on, whatever. But basically, the thing that had all this discussion and topic and debate was just the fact that basically Steve was like, I would love to come on, and Bill Maher always smokes a ton of weed because it's super cool, guys. Smokes a ton of weed and during it, and he's not like hitting the vape pen or anything else like that. It's just like clouds of smoke machine and whatnot. Just fucking, but but so. And Steve was like, "Yeah, I would rather not have that. I don't want to be around the smell of the weed and the smoke and everything else like that, right?" And Bill Maher's like, "How about no?" And they were, as far as I know. Now, again, this is not this is not like a news break thing. Who cares? But it's more so just an example to talk about something prevalent to all this, which is just basically Steve was like, all right, well, no. And then so there was this huge thing where he's like, he's disrespecting his sobriety, and that's so disrespectful. And so with a lot of things too, there's this, and again, it's so funny. I don't think either of them were even combative in this sense, but everybody's arguing for everybody else, where everyone's like, well, no, he's not like, does he need to be babied, or does he, which is so funny. I mean, the shit, again, you don't know sometimes if stuff you read is just people trolling or if it's really what people think, or sometimes if it is just exposing what people think and don't say. It's very hard to tell. But there is a lot of thoughts that I know are pervasive when it comes to stuff like this. And someone was just like, well, he's not sober, he's just isolated, and which is hilarious to think, because not only is Steve-O famous, he's like a touring comedian, and as someone who has like dipped their toe in stand-up before, very minorly, you're in bars all the time. Like, as far as exposure goes, he probably has a ton of it. It's just that weed could be a thing. There's individuals triggers, and so a lot of people are also like, dude, he's almost 16. His sobriety, he's almost old enough to drive. Like, he can't handle like weed smoke, and it's one of those things where he just like, I prefer not to do it, right? And here's the thing, again, still thinking Bill Maher's a huge dork and all that stuff like that. I don't think he's disrespecting his sobriety at all. I mean, this speaks to something larger where Steve-O doesn't have to be on his show. He doesn't have to. Like, it would be super disrespectful if it was like something that was contractually agreed upon, and then Bill Maher was like, "Oh, by the way, I'm going to smoke weed the whole time." And Steve was like, "Please don't," and he did anyways. But he doesn't have to be. It was literally just I think even like Steve-O announced it as just like a gesture to everybody else. It's like, hey, I still take this very seriously. It was almost like a good. It would be hilarious if he actually even wasn't planning on going on the show, but he just wanted to say this all. I was like, hey, I still take this seriously day by day, no matter what. You're never fully out of it. And you always got to do recovery. Great message. Well, obviously, like with anything on the internet, great message is immediately destroyed. And so, but this, again, speaking to the larger point, is you see this discourse all the time where I had done a video about this a little while ago about the idea of so much of where stigma comes from is a lot of it is just through people in active addiction and the bad behaviors. But there's also, like, I think usually with a lot of times when people are sort of shamed one way or the other, it is coming from an own place of like insecurity for whatever reason. You may feel some, so you put the shame on other people, which, speaking from the person in recovery point of view, I've known a lot of times, and you see it play out a lot, where there is the person in recovery where they, there may be, there's a lot of events or things around them, especially in their social group or, their little community, whatever it may be, where there's stuff where there's just like a lot of drinking, and the person doing the right thing and, steering clear of it if they feel they need to, the person is also a little miffed by that. So they're just, they'll take on this attitude of just like, everybody's an alcoholic, man. Everybody's addicted to everything. Or, the person that gets newly sober and just starts looking down. All they can see is just below here, just under their nose, like looking down on everybody. Just like, someone just cracks a beer during a football game and like, yeah, you're drinking at 11 in the morning, huh? And they're like, shut up, man. We're not, that's a you problem, not me. And because again, that attitude comes from an insecurity. Like it's a weird fact that this thing that a lot of people really enjoy, also destroys my life. I mean, it's got to be the way that, people with like severe nut allergies go to a restaurant, and when everybody's ready to eat food, they're like, does this contain nuts? I'm sorry to bug everybody, but it might kill me. And so it comes from that place. And then on the other side, like another realm of insecurity is that I know there are also plenty of people that they, it's again, not doing that thing where everybody's an alcoholic or an addict, but they, it's just the idea that people that probably struggle or probably drinking too much or maybe smoking too much weed or anything else like that, like, have this insecurity about it. And they're just like, they will attack the other person that does anything like this. Again, Steve-O, I assume, has no expectations of like, I have to be on your show and you need to not do that. But they'll take it as that. And they're just like, see, these are just like basically like Mormons out here. Like they just want everybody to live this way and they want to impose this on everybody. And it's like, no, that's not true either. That probably comes from the fact that maybe you're worried about how much you're drinking and you don't want to be lumped in with that, like sort of having a sort of a chemical dependency issue, which you probably don't, but you just don't like that feeling. And that's a lot of this stuff, and a lot of stuff in life where people argue in this way, when it really at the end of the day, everything is okay, like everything's fine, is because of the way people feel uncomfortable. And like an example I use to kind of like highlight this. Now, this is not a perfect one-to-one or anything else like this. I think it's just a good, like an analogy to kind of highlight this type of stuff, is that you'll see, like, just imagine that there's some, I don't know, group get together setting or social thing together, and somebody has a service dog there, right? They have a, fully verified and absolutely needed, I don't know if the dog has a degree or whatever, certified, whatever, but service dog, right? And they bring the dog there, and everyone's like, dude, we love dogs. It's great. Pet the dog. Maybe dog weirdly sniffs your crotch, whatever. It's all fun. But then there's also someone there that is actually like deathly afraid of dogs for whatever reason. Maybe something happened to them with a dog that had bit them when they were younger. Maybe they just have a phobia. Maybe they just saw Cujo too many times. Who knows? But they're like really scared of dogs. And so there is this issue now where, the person for this, this service animal, even if it's, let's say it's an emotional support animal, it's not like a seeing eye dog or anything else like that. Especially that, if it is that case, they feel kind of uncomfortable because they're like, ooh, this thing that I need is kind of infringing on someone else. And infringing is too strong a word, but it's making someone uncomfortable, and it's causing an issue for someone. And the other person could be on the other side of it too. The person who's afraid of the dog, they're just like, well, this person needs this thing. And now I feel like the weirdo because, like, a lot of people love this dog. They're all petting this dog and everybody seems fine by this. And I'm the weirdo who's like super scared of this thing that everybody seems to be enjoying. And that could play out sometimes where people keep their insecurities like in within them, right? But there's also the case too, where it could be the person that lashes out because of this insecurity or because of the discomfort they feel, or in their mind they could turn it around and like, they don't need that dog. Is that dog even certified? Like, they don't need that dog there. Or they, if they need it there, this is not a place for dogs, wherever it is. And they don't need it. And they're not even about making points. They're kind of getting irrationally angry because they're they're uncomfortable, and they're uncomfortable in a way that they can't quite control. And it could be the exact opposite side of it too. The person who feels uncomfortable that there's someone there that's really scared of their dog could be easily be like, well, you know what? You're afraid of dogs? Who's afraid of dogs? Look at this dog. The dog's name is Biscuits. It's a friendly dog. It's not a big scary Cujo dog. Like, that's so silly that you're afraid of this dog. And again, the other person can be like, it's so silly that you need a dog. Both things are valid. Both things really are. And other people, especially if you care about that person, and this is in a scenario where everybody else is kind of like aware of what's going on and the dynamic in the room, people could be defensive for that person. They could be like, that person doesn't need their dog there. This is a place for people, not dogs. Like, don't be scaring my friend. The other way around, where that person could be like, you know what, this is a dog that they need, and you just need to. You don't need to be scared of dogs, or it's silly if you are. That's you problem. It's basically most people going, this is a you problem. And I find that play out many times with people in recovery and people not, and sometimes the clashes that people have or the clashes of opinions people have, because essentially, because going back to the scenario with the dog and the person afraid of the dog, there is not a person who is right. You essentially just have to come to a compromise of like, all right, there are needs on both sides. How are we going to make this fit? As someone who's going to compromise, is there a way we can compromise where we can both be here, or does someone just have to like be like, you know what, I'll sit out or I'll do whatever. And again, some people, it could be a case where no one even wants to do that, right? And they get mad because of it. And it's nothing against the person at hand. It's nothing against the person with the phobia or the person with the service dog or like support dog or whatever. It's more so just the case that you just run into this sort of conflict that happens. And this happens all the time. And again, when it involves discomfort and insecurity and social pressure, you have all these blowups where people just start saying all this mindless shit. Like, because one thing is, especially a person as they look towards like outwards towards society, as far as like if they might have a drinking or drug problem, and they're not going to admit it, they're in denial, they want to minimize it. They will do the thing where just like everyone's addicted to everything. Everyone's, I saw again another thing, probably on the internet too much. I saw this other thing where someone they talked about they were doing a stand-up thing, and the person was on stage was drinking coffee, and the person was like, what are you drinking, because it looked weird, and they're like, a coffee, and the person mentioned they were sober, and immediately clickety click click click, someone's just like, well, they're not sober, they're just chugging caffeine. And it's just like, geez, if I have to explain to you the difference between like a debilitating like drinking addiction or a debilitating drug addiction and caffeine, because then the person go, actually, people can be addicted to caffeine in a way that like makes them physically ill and sick and stuff like that. And it's just like, yes, actually, those super outliers are also true. Are we going to go with like what the like reality normal is? Can we like understand that there are exceptions, almost exceptions that prove the rule because it's so rare? Yeah, but it's that, again, it's a sort of defense mechanism. Like everybody's addicted to everything. And, this is where you have people conflating like psychoactive meds, like antidepressants and SSRIs and stuff like that. And it's just like, they're just, it's one drug for another. And it's like, dude, let me tell you something. Those are not the same as mood altering drugs. It's like, it's supposed to alter your mood. It has it right in the name, antidepressant and stuff. And it's like, believe me, if those were things that like you really could use like drugs, I would be abusing Zoloft. Like, it's so not that way. But again, this sort of like, and a lot of times I think it's people that just think it's purely just a matter of like ignorance, where it's like people are just like, man, they're so dumb. And I don't know, I go back and forth where I don't think it's quite ignorance a lot. Again, I think it comes from this place of the insecurity about the way they feel, that you want, right? You want to believe that everybody else is addicted to stuff. So if you're addicted to stuff, really you are, like, you don't feel as bad because everybody else is. Everybody's either addicted to their Starbucks chinos or they're addicted to their food, or they're addicted to the money, or and again, those do exist. Like, I hate always having to put out so many caveats. You think you could just talk in like an understandable manner about like, we understand like what the reality of this is, but a lot of people don't. Like, one thing you learn very much when you grow up is that the people do not see the world the same way you do by any means. But these realities that where people conflate what addictions are and how they should be treated. Like, and I don't mean treated as in like actual treatment, like rehab or therapy or recovery meetings or stuff like that. Treated within within society. Like, what is the case? Like, if the person, like, I always think about it this way, where it's so funny. I know, and I myself have done this, where you waver on this way, especially if you're in early recovery. You waver in this feeling of, I need to protect my recovery and I need to be cautious and not trigger myself and everything else like that. But also, I don't want to be babied. I don't want people to treat me like I'm a baby or this like feeble, like very weak person. And again, that comes from that insecure place to where people, like, if somebody is like, oh, is it okay if I bring this beer, or is it okay if I do this? People are like, yes, it is. Do it. Drink it. You know what? Drink the whole 12 pack. Get wasted. It's totally fine. Don't care. Just, you better be wasted. Because again, you feel this sense of like, you don't want to impose on to other people, like something that you have to do for yourself. And then in this, in I would say strange, but it's not that strange. It's totally understandable. In this way, you start feeling shame for what you have to do to protect yourself, or what you have to do for your own well-being. And I know a lot of people that sometimes it's the feeling of missing out, but sometimes it's not wanting to feel weak or needy in that way, to where people in recovery will put themselves in dangerous situations, risky situations, because they just simply don't want to feel that way. They don't want to feel like this sense of like a mental like disability of what they are capable of doing or not capable of doing. They don't want to feel like they're a burden to somebody, or especially just like if they're a wet blanket, if they're a buzzkill. That people absolutely, I think people would rather feel like a burden than a buzzkill. And so the thing is, you sacrifice that, because the thing is like, you could always leave. You don't have to participate. But one, sometimes people want to participate in whatever like social gathering or event or thing you're doing. Or two, they still know that people will be, like, oh, they're gonna worry about me, or this seems weird now. I'm not even drunk and I have to do this Irish goodbye. I have to just disappear, and people may feel uncomfortable because now that person, because of something we're doing to have fun, that person has to leave. And it's like, as long as you give just like a sort of honest, transparent communication about it, it's fine. And I mean, you also have to, one, it's important to remember, you are not on the minds of people as much as you think you are, right? Like, you're like, what will they think about me when I'm gone and stuff? It's like, they probably won't think about you that much, honestly. But the other thing is too, is that you have to be just cognizant of, what the ultimate goal here is to stay sober. And if I feel even the slightest bit of being uncomfortable about this, or I think it's a risk, because I also think of it this way too. Maybe it's not even super risky to your sobriety as far as like a relapse or a trigger, but you just feel uncomfortable, then it's kind of pointless anyway. Then you're just being in a situation for an hour or so, just where you feel uncomfortable. And it's kind of like, man, what's the point of doing that? But again, there's this feeling of wanting to feel like I'm good, like I'm strong enough, like, it's so funny. There are people I know that just immediately, especially if they're younger and they've been more sociable and stuff like that, they want to just get back out there. They just want to be like, listen, guys, girls, whoever, friend group, everybody, don't treat me any differently. You don't need to like treat me with kid gloves or anything else like that. I'm going to be back with you partying. I'll just have my Red Bull or my water and it'll be all good. And it's this sense where there's like, I don't want you to think anything like differently of me. And it's just like, well, if you actually are addicted to something, then that is noticeable. It's like a person that has like really compromised like lungs and breathing issues. And they're like, look, I know I have these things where I had to go to the hospital many times for it, but I want to hang out with you guys. I don't care if you're just smoking cigs and if you all have COVID or anything like that. Don't worry about me. I'm totally cool. Don't worry. How dare you worry? And it's like, no, you have to give yourself grace and at least just be realistic with what, and again, this comes to, it's funny because it seems like an oxymoron, like self-imposed peer pressure, but it really is in a way where you think for other people towards yourself. You think about what other people are thinking about you. And a lot of times it's either not true or it's not that big of a deal. And at the end of the day, so much of this stuff that you you worry about that I would worry about is just like, man, it's like etch a sketch stuff, dude. Like, regardless of what even happens in this little like interaction, it's gonna be shaken up and gone the next day, you know, like goldfish memory type deal that you're still worrying about days afterwards, or you're letting it like hurt your self-worth and your own value as far as like what other people think of you. And that is just a huge thing too, is that, you know, this especially is like the idea of expectations that are like imagined expectations of others, or how we feel about ourselves. Because usually, again, if we are new in recovery, our self-esteem and our like self-worth is very low because of just what we came from and what happened. And so in that way, we don't want to feel like that anymore. But you have to treat yourself with some caution, and you have to, you know, and again, this is also another thing, because I see people take it the other way too, where it's like this big and pronouncement of like, this is the way things gotta be here. And if you crack one beer near me, you are not my friend, and you wish me well, and you wish I live in the gutter. And you have to remember too that this is like a super, you know, if you have alcoholism or addiction, this is like a debilitating, you know, affliction that you have. But it's almost just like peanut allergies, where the person may not be aware, they might be forgetful. And it's not because they're callous, or they don't care about you, or they disrespect you. It's not anything to do with that. People are just, they're absent-minded. Again, they're not in your head as much as you are, and they're not as much thinking about you as much as you think about you. And it's not because they don't care. It's just that that's the way people are. And so, you know, going back to the original thing, the impetus for all this is just this conversation about like who is, you know, because again, like the offenders of like Bill Maher are probably just offenders of like weed smokers, which, by the way, I have no issue with weed whatsoever. Super big like legalization type of person, which may sound stupid as someone in recovery. That's probably because also I don't like weed, and I never have for whatever reason. I wish I did, in the sense that I wish I would rather that than harder drugs, but whatever, or booze. But point being is that some people, again, if they are, you know, super into smoking weed and pot, and maybe if it's a little bit of their identity, and then this person who is on this path of self-betterment, again, self-betterment, not betterment for the world or other people, just for themselves. But if their path requires this, then sometimes it can feel like a personal attack on them. Like, oh, seriously, you can't be around weed? Weed is so benign, and it's just like not that big of a deal. And so you must be a weakling, or you must be just constantly in fear. You're not even sober. You're just isolated. You know, you're just not sober. You're in fear. You just feel around all the weed, you know, to prove it. And it's just like, no. It's none of those things. Like, you don't need to feel personally attacked because of this decision that a person is making for themselves, right? And the person that is making that decision for themselves also doesn't need to feel attacked if the person's like, okay, yeah, well, then you go your way, I'll go mine. I'm going to do my thing. That is not an affront to you. That is simply them exercising what they want to do for themselves. And here's even the bigger thing. Let's say it is self-destructive. Like, let's say it is actually a bad habit. That is still not your place to judge them for that. Because, and I see this a lot, where somebody will, because they feel insecure. It's the same way that a lot of times couples or people will fight, where they feel insecure about something, and so they jab at them in that sort of projection way, where it's like, look, I'm just saying this to help you. I'm just saying this. And really what you're doing is you're hurt because of what insecurity taps into you. So you're pointing this out. So when it's just like, you know, it's the person that is like, all right, fine, Steven doesn't need to go on for weed and stuff. You enjoy being fat and lazy and playing video games, being stoned all the time. And it's just like, okay. That is you and your projection of, you know, because again, that is one of the things that I just like, you see, a lot of people in recovery become so defensive about the choices that other people make. And again, even if it is self-destructive choices, even if it is maybe choices that's not best for them, it is not your place to just dictate how people should live their lives. If they ask you for help, then there you go. If they are suffering acutely from the affliction you are, and you feel like you can provide something for them, sure. But if it's just like a choice you don't agree with, or something that you like reminds you of some of the bad choices you've had, it's not your place to like put them down or lecture them or anything else like that. You know, And I just see that occur so much because, again, sometimes it actually comes from a good place. Sometimes it's people are just like, my life was such a mess, and this reminds me of younger me. Don't be younger me. And so they will go forth and just absolutely, they completely try to like save them from this thing. And it's just like, maybe you don't know that person, or even bigger, maybe if you are right about something that a substance issue that they have, you're not going to be able to save them. I mean, think about it when you were in your addiction with some random person or some just ancillary person in your life. Were they going to be the one to like give you these wide truth bomb words that were going to pull you out of this whole mess or make you come to the realization you need to? Probably not. And, if you're doing that to make yourself feel better, I don't know, that doesn't seem great, but I just, I see a lot of this discourse happen all the time where, again, it's like it's either or. It's either everybody is addicted to everything all the time. And again, not to get into semantics, but that idea of addiction, because what people usually mean when they're saying that is this, like, everybody's addicted to something. So my addiction or your addiction doesn't matter because we're all addicted to something. And it's so insane to like not to have a sliding scale of like the the like, unless you're totally 100% abstinent, like no one is sober. No, there's obviously a much bigger difference in what is like an acutely destructive and chronic sort of affliction that destroys your life or vastly just harms it in a way. Maybe people are like functional addicts or alcoholics. And at the same time too, if you have a person that is unsure about where they stand, and a lot of times people will seek out others, or they'll seek out opinions of others to kind of make a decision about where they're at. You have to understand, especially online and stuff, a lot of people are just posturing too. A lot of people are sometimes just straight up trolling, or sometimes just putting stuff out there to kind of like test the waters or kind of see where they're at or just see what reaction they'll get. And it's no way really to base your life. It's more so the people around you that know you better. That would be, because I know it's one of the biggest things that we always, if we are confused about something, we look to others. And unfortunately, we think that like, well, why don't I get the consensus of thousands or millions of people? But there is so much misinformation about there because on stuff that's already fact, there's misinformation, but with addiction and recovery, there's so much gray area that you could argue all day. Because here's the funny thing is that like those addictions that seem benign, and people are like, no, like that's not an addiction. Like just because you're like on caffeine or nicotine, that's not at the same level. And then some people will just take that a rung up and be like, yeah, also weed goes in that category too. And then some people are like, no, weed is not sober. And it always comes back to, and then you get the same people like, oh yeah, weed's not sober, and neither is antidepressants. And you're like, what? Like, it just seems like there's no line of demarcation about what it is. I mean, for the most part, it really only should matter to you. And in that sense, going back to the original point about, whatever Steve's sobriety is, I mean, it's 16 years, like almost 16 years, right? And he's doing something right, obviously. And if he just needs to advocate for himself, and he said something, like some people are like, well, he didn't need to say anything. It's just like, he obviously could have been saying it again as this gesture of what he still does for his recovery on a day-to-day level, even being this far down the line in it. And again, even with Bill Maher, he's not being a dick in the sense where it's just like, yeah, it's his show, it's whatever he wants to do. Again, Steve doesn't have to do that. And that's a lot of cases within society where, if there's something where like there's this crossroads, like people will come to where it's just like, you don't want to be around a place that's drinking, but you do want to go there. And if you realize maybe you shouldn't go there, then you might harbor, again, a resentment of, oh, do they have to drink? Everybody's drinking all the time. What's wrong with the world and everything else like that? Or it's the other way around, where because you feel that way, you want to prove to yourself or prove to others like, oh, I can be around it. And then you put yourself in honestly needlessly harmful situations, that like could be triggering to you. And again, this has happened to me before where it doesn't matter if you go to a place and it's really tough and you're really like triggered and or you're very stimulated in a bad way about thoughts about drinking or using or something like that. But then you survive it and you're like, woo, I survived it. Good, victory. Sometimes that can just plant a seed in your mind and that can stay in your mind a little bit longer, and the memory and the stimulus you got from that can like stay with you. Like just because you survived the night doesn't mean that it was an overall good. Like doesn't really mean it's a victory. It could be a detriment because like if you just continually putting yourself in these again sort of risky exposing situations, and again where you don't need to be, you don't need to prove anything to anyone. So many times people are just like, this recovery is for myself. I don't care about what anybody thinks about it. I got to do it for me. And then sometimes they go off all these patterns where they just like they feel like they seem like they have to prove it to everybody. They seem like even saying it out loud over and over again. It's kind of like the person who's like, I don't give a fuck about what anybody thinks about me. I don't care about any of this shit. It's just like, if you don't, why are you saying any of this stuff? Like, people that truly don't give a shit don't tell people they don't give a shit. And I don't know. It's funny. Like, it's always funny to me just the sort of quandaries that people get in where regarding like the way sobriety should look, especially when it comes from people that aren't in it. And again, the stigma, I think, honestly, it just doesn't always come from a place of lack of knowledge. It comes from people's own insecurity. And that peer pressure is the same thing as well, too, for addicts and alcoholics in recovery, where you like, again, a good example is that like someone is not disrespecting your sobriety if as long as like it's fully a choice. It's not anything you have to be at. It's not anything that you like. I mean, obviously, if it's like Christmas and you want to be a part of the family and like the little gathering and stuff, it's just like, hey, I'm gonna be here for an hour. Just gonna say hi, spend some time. If you guys couldn't drink like around me or something else like that, there's different dynamics to that. But just like in social settings or with friends, be very aware of what your scenario is in congruence with the rest of the world, and more so how people aren't thinking about it as much as you are. Again, if people not thinking about you as much as you think they are is not a measure of they don't care or that you're insignificant. It's just the way it is. I don't know. Think about how much you truly think about other people. So I don't know, random live stream on TGIF, right?